I've spent a certain amount of my life trying to burn things down or shout at things or
Yeah.
kind of protest about things. And I find that as an individual, as I try and push into the system pushes back. I'm kind of up against homeostasis, that kind of
Mhm.
a way a system protects itself and says, look, my only job is to maintain the status quo. I'm wondering how your understanding of change has evolved over the years.
It's a good question. I think the insight for me, which I carried with me for a long time, but I do need to remind myself regularly of, is that at the end of the day, you can only transform individuals.
Mm,
Crowds or systems can only evolve.
that's interesting.
And this goes back to this whole idea of you influence a single person. You first of all, you never kind of really know what
It's
happens with
true.
that, right?
It's
And
true.
clearly in your work, you see this every day.
Right.
And I
Well,
see it in my
I see myself not knowing what impact I'm having,
yeah,
to be
exactly.
nuanced, which is like, I can support people or teach people or coach people, and I'm like, it's not entirely clear what's landed and what will be different as a result of what I've just done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And for me, this was an interesting reckoning. I remember one of the first big keynotes I did,
Mm,
where you have this rush of adrenaline. You're like
mm.
speaking in front of like 1,000 people. It's amazing, and then you get off stage and you're like, quite frankly, I was just a monkey on a stage.
Right.
Like after me, they have their hors d'oeuvre and they drink some champagne, have a good time.
Right.
Go to the party, whatever.
And they've
So
definitely spent more on the champagne and the hors d'oeuvres than they
clearly.
spent on your speaking fee. So you're like, ah.
Well, and you just ask yourself like, what's the impact, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then for me, the interesting insight was that years later, I met a person who was in that audience and said,
Mm.
Pascal, like the thing you told me got me to quit my job and
Uh,
change this thing and create this company, and now we're doing this. So you just never know.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that as a base, and then really understanding that systems are comprised of humans, of individuals, and the only way you can change the system is by changing the individual.
Got it.
And that's what kinds of keeps me going.
Yeah. And then let me ask you this. What's changed in your understanding of how individuals change? How's that shifted over the years?
I believe I probably started with the wrong assumption that if you just put yourself out there, if you're just energetic enough, like they will see the light, they will see the thing you can see and just follow you blindly,
Yeah.
which reality is most people don't like to change, and for
Mm.
good reasons, because quite frankly, I don't like to change at the end of
Right.
the day.
Right.
And I think what I learned is that if you really want to get to change, it's this really intricate balancing act, this dance between showing someone the promised land, like making
Mm.
them see it, but they need to see it for themselves.
Right.
Also, making them just uncomfortable enough in their skin that they actually feel not only the desire to change, but also the necessity to
Right.
change. And then, most importantly, and I think that's the role, like people like you and I have, is to give them the tools to actually be able to change.
Mm. Nice.
Right. So it's an interesting. I find it's a much more delicate dance than I thought it was originally. I thought originally it's like 1, 2,
Yeah.
3, done.
Yeah.
Right.
Just let me light the
It's
fuse
obvious.
and yeah. Yeah.
And in reality is you realize, everybody's a little different. Everybody, like some people react to the promised land better. Other people
Yeah.
need a little bit more of the burning platform feeling to
Yeah.
move,
Yeah.
and then
That's
other
true.
people are just, they're fine. They just need, like, just tell me what I need to do.
Hey, it's MBS here. My newsletter is The Works with MBS. Every week I take a key tool, insight, metaphor, and make it an essential distillation so that you can unlock your greatness. If that sounds interesting, sign up at mbs.works.